Hey everyone, Kevin here. The other day I was thinking back to my time in education and remembered just how little I was supported by administrators. And I know I talked about that pretty often, but it made me realize that I constantly accepted positions with poor leaders in education. And this is why I wanted to briefly talk about the benefits of having a boss that actually cares. And believe me, teachers generally have had a little exposure to good leaders. I know I talked about the perils of bad leadership in an older video, but I kind of wanted to revisit and expand upon the flip side of that discussion. And don't get me wrong, identifying good bosses during an application process isn't easy, and could potentially even warrant its own video at some point. But it's vital that we seek them out in order to ensure a good working environment. Having a good and supportive boss is actually one of the most underrated employee benefits. Everyone talks about salary, insurance, growth opportunities, etc., but we don't spend time on finding someone who we would actually want to work for. As a career transitioner myself and someone who left education, with this again being one of the leading reasons, I'm a walking example of that quote: people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers. Now, of course, that doesn't apply to everyone, but it leads into the first benefit of having a good boss: longevity in your position. If you feel listened to, appreciated, and seen as an asset, you're naturally going to want to stay as long as you can in that job, since it's ultimately what we want as human beings. I remember my last position with Cruise had this in spades. I really enjoyed working there, and all my bosses were fantastic. It was a breath of fresh air compared to what I dealt with in education, and it reminded me of how work is supposed to be. I wanted to stay in that job as long as I could, and I wish it could have continued. Unfortunately, that position ended due to a layoff, but I'll always remember it fondly for the way I was treated, the professionalism, and most importantly, the trust placed in me, which is the second point here. Good bosses create an environment of trust, which leads to increased productivity. Employees perform much better when they feel like they are trusted to complete assignments in their own way rather than being micromanaged. I mean, we've all been there, right? Where we had a boss who constantly looked over our shoulder because they always assumed we were doing something wrong. None of us found that appealing, and if anything, it was actually kind of insulting. Frankly, this is the way the evaluation system is set up in teaching too. They're designed to catch you making a mistake instead of helping you to grow and be sure of yourself. Actions speak louder than words, after all, and bosses that allow us to just do our jobs and produce results speaks volumes. Now, number three, mistakes aren't demonized. They're seen as something to grow from, learn from, and realize when personal or professional development is needed. A boss that supports you in this way helps you identify places of growth and aids you in rectifying those mistakes in something you can't put a price on. Having one that instead makes you feel like a failure for doing something wrong isn't helpful. It's toxic. Plus, it leads to even better workers who want to learn and apply new things for you, thus furthering that longevity I mentioned back in the first point. And all of this leads to the conclusion that we need a positive workplace culture where everyone feels comfortable. Employees will never be loyal to an organization if they don't have a boss that makes them feel welcomed. Frankly, staying with a company for a really long period of time just isn't normal these days. But you increase that time you hold on to these workers when they're just happy to be there. People are less likely to leave as quickly when they love their coworkers and their managers who make them feel free to just be themselves. And finally, number five, inspiration is welcomed. We all have ideas on how to make a process or system better. A boss that values you and your opinions won't be condescending. They'll be appreciative of your insights, and that makes you want to be the best version of yourself that you can be. This reminds me a lot of a scene from Star Trek: The Next Generation, where Riker and Captain Jellico have serious disagreements over the way to run the ship. Jellico was an incredibly hard-nosed, my way or the highway kind of person. He got the job done every single time and was very competent, but was an impossible boss for anyone to really want to work with. Riker ultimately told him that he was arrogant, close-minded, and that he needed to control everything and everyone. Under his command, no one wanted to go out of their way for him. He didn't foster an atmosphere of trust, and he had the entire crew wound up so tight that there was no joy in their work. Even though he always produced results, he's certainly not a person I would like to work under. Ultimately, having a positive boss makes you actually want to go out of your way for them and be the best worker you can be. We all want to be supported, and having a positive boss is one of the most underrated things in the business world, in my view. Make sure that don't stay up in a job that has a boss that's hard to deal with because it ruins your mental health. In the end, I'm always a mental health advocate, and when this topic popped in my head, I realized that it's an important part of a worker's mental health and needed to be discussed. But I think that's all for today. As always, I'm here to help should you ever need it. See you next time.